Now it's time for Viking Mail Call, a weekly show where you, the fans, get to ask the questions on your mind and have them answered by former Minnesota Vikings linebacker and coach, Pete Bursich. And now your host, Tom Moore.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vikings Mail Call. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and joining me as he does each week is former Minnesota Vikings linebacker and coach, and now radio game day color analyst, Pete Bursich. Well, Pete, you know, when we were kids, some of us wanted to go into politics, others were drawn to a military career, but the vast majority dreamed of a life in sports or entertainment. But our guest today, he's had all those careers. He's the former governor of Minnesota. Pete, can you tell NFL fans who our special guest is this week?
Proud to introduce a guy who I think is still the best analyst in the business, and it's Jesse the Body Ventura. Jesse, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Pete, and you know, I only lasted 1 year with that Viking color job that I had there, but I'm glad that you took it over. I know it's in good hands.
Well, thank you very much. I got big shoes to fill, and I'm just trying to do it every day.
Yeah, well, I actually lasted longer at Tampa. I was 2 years at Tampa, and then I came up to Minnesota, 3 years in the NFL broadcasting. But I got to tell you, I loved it. You know, it was great. I'll tell you a quick story. When I first got to Tampa, dealing with the regular media, they were all cocky to introduce me. I was going to be the color analyst for the Bucks. And Hugh Culverhouse owned the team then, you know, old Hugh. And I remember a guy from the media saying, Jesse the Body Ventura, the voice of pro wrestling. Well, Mr. Ventura, where do you get off doing pro football when you never actually played in the NFL? And I looked at the guy and I said, that's true. I never played in the NFL. I went on to pro wrestling, but I said, it seems if it's a prerequisite to have played in the NFL to talk about it, then it ought to be a prerequisite to have played in the NFL to write about it. So I said, I don't see any of you as being former pro football players. What gives you the right to write about it then? Boy, they left me alone, Pete. They didn't bother me at all after that.
That's right. It's a great way to answer that question. Just put it back on.
My point was simple. Football's football. I played football in grade school. I played in junior high. I played in high school. I played a year of service ball. I played a year of college ball. It's the same game. It's just played at a different level with better people.
Yeah, no question. And the bottom line still is entertainment. I mean, people still want to listen to you. And you know, along those lines, Jesse, I remember you calling the wrestling matches, and you and Vince McMahon. I still go back to YouTube, listen to them, and I just love them. I mean, what was it about the wrestling side of calling the matches that was so much fun for you? And did any of that track over into your NFL, or did you use any of the acronyms and the sayings and things like that when you called NFL games?
Well, again, Pete, you know, you're on the radio. You're there to call a game, but you're also there to be entertaining. You know, anybody can call a drab football game when you can't see anything. You have to rely on the radio voice to give you excitement, to give you a mental picture of, you know, you might be working out in your yard and listening on the radio. Well, you want a mental picture of what went on. And as the color man, that's what the play-by-play man will call the play. And then when the play is over, it's your job as the color man to add some interesting insight into that play if you can, or to entertain. And that's how I took it. As far as the WWF, I'll tell you, I had it made there. Because when Vince McMahon, I had been injured, and Vince decided, well, I've never had a villain on the mic before. He called me up. He wanted to get me back in. He said, we're going to try putting a villain on the microphone. You think you could do it? I said, sure I could. And I'll never forget the first night that I went on the microphone to be the villain announcer. It had never been done before. Vince comes up to me and gives me my marching orders. Here's what they were. He said, I want you to be simple. If you believe it, it's true. How can you get better orders than that? I mean, that's carte blanche. He's telling me, do what you want. If you don't have to apologize. If you believe it, it's true. And I remember the one we did for Saturday Night Main Event. Do you recall when Uncle Elmer got married in the ring?
Yes, I do.
Oh, Vince comes up to me before the show on NBC and he says, bury them. I want him buried on this. I said, really? He said, bury them. So it got to me, and Bill Murray sent word back, so I took it with that grain of salt. The great comedian Bill Murray said it's the greatest live line he ever heard, was when it came time for the tender kiss between Uncle Elmer and his wife, right? I looked at it right on the mic and I said, McMahon, I said, that looks like two carp going after the same piece of corn in the Mississippi River. And Bill Murray sent word back. He fell on the floor laughing. He'd never heard a wild line like that done on a live event. And that's the great thing about with Vince. He turned me loose, and there was no holds barred. You know, anything that entertained was okay, just as long as, of course, you fell under FCC, you couldn't swear, and you couldn't, you know, it wasn't serious radio. Can you imagine if they'd have turned me loose on there?
You know, Jesse, I guess with the, again, one more question with the wrestling. Are there any of the guys that you wrestled with against, commented on, that you're still in touch with? I mean, who were your good friends, and were there real guys that didn't care for, guys that...
We were professional, you know. You tried not to let personalities outside the ring enter into your professional performance. That's the way I always did it. I was very much a loner. I didn't really hang with anybody when I was in the business. I found that was the safest way to do with it. I didn't go to the bars because I found out bad things happen in bars at midnight. And if you don't want bad things to happen, avoid them. So I would go to my hotel, and probably the closest friend I had was the late Big John Studd, because John had a great wife and kids, and we used to ride together, and Big John used to always rent those great big Lincoln Town cars that had plenty of room in them. And so John and I would do a lot of traveling together. But really, as a whole, I got to tell you, I'm in touch with no one in wrestling today. I moved on after 1990 and really left it behind me as part of my history and moved ahead in my life.
Moving ahead, Jesse, right now you are joining us off the set of the Off the Grid show, which is aptly named, starting its second season over TV. You're spending these days out in the country and off the mainstream. Tell us about why you live so many days out in the country and really what you hope to accomplish with your show.
Well, I live farther than I live outside the country, and I think it's always a good perspective. Not enough people in the United States view the United States from the outside looking in. All they see is from the inside looking out. And it's very disturbing outside the United States to see the United States today. Let me give you a point, Pete. There was a Gallup poll that was done about 2 months ago with 3,000 people internationally, and one of the questions was, if you went to war, who do you think it would be against? And 23% of these international people named the United States of America. Second place was Pakistan. Third place with 8%. China with 6% was third. As a veteran, I hang my head in shame that the United States of America today is looked at as the most aggressive military nation in the world, and that 1 out of 4 people think if they go to war, it will be against us. That's astounding to me.
And what precipitated this type of reputation, do you think? You're right. We don't get a chance to go out there. We see everything from the inside.
What precipitates it is every war we're involved in. We go in no matter what. I mean, when we invaded Iraq, I was against that war from the start. I still am against it. You wouldn't have ISIS today if we hadn't invaded Iraq. They wouldn't exist over there. That's a crazy place in the world where dictators, the only way they can be ruled, in my opinion, is by dictators. It's the only thing that keeps stability. We unstabilized it. Was it done on purpose so we'd be at war forever? Because remember, and then the other set, I'll change gears. The other thing that upsets me about the U.S., do you know we're called home of the brave, land of the free? And yet we have more people. We're number 1 in the world now with people incarcerated, in prison. How can we call ourselves land of the free when we have the most people of any country in the world in prison?
It's a good question. On the freedom side, it is a right. But what do you think's causing that kind of thing?
Well, one of the major problems, you're seeing it being rectified right now, is this ridiculous war on drugs. You're seeing certain states now legalizing marijuana. Okay, take the state of Washington where they legalized marijuana now. Guess what I just learned from my neighbors down here who are from Washington? They said that the expenditure of the judicial branch of government has now dropped like 15% because they're no longer prosecuting people for possession and use of marijuana, which they shouldn't anyway. In a free society, how can you commit a crime against yourself? if you're supposed to be a free society. And drug usage is that. You can be addicted to anything, Pete. You know it as well as I do. There's a lot of pills that fly around in dressing rooms, pain pills that addict you. Take a look at coffee, for example. Imagine people, if they couldn't get a cup of coffee tomorrow, you'd have murders over it. So addiction should be treated medically. It should not be treated criminally.
Well, one of the things I always wanted to know on your side, Jesse, is you've been involved in so many parts of government and also on the military side. Right out of high school in Minnesota, you joined the Navy underwater demolition team. And, a lot of people have heard stories about that, but we interview world-class athletes on a weekly basis. And, of course, they strive to be elite in their game, and they have hard, intense workouts to get to that level that they play on the field. But I'm curious, for others that haven't had that test of will or character, what's the toughest part about being a Navy SEAL?
Well, the toughest part, obviously, is you first qualify to go to what they call BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. You really need to be, for the most part, a triathlete. You've got to be a strong swimmer. You've got to be a runner who can run for long distances. They're not interested in sprints. And all your running is done in combat boots in the sand. So you can imagine. And I remember the most difficult is first phase, when they get to the 5th week, which they call motivation week, or it's commonly referred to as Hell Week, where you stay awake from Sunday night until Saturday morning. Today it's only to Friday morning because they found out nobody quits between Friday and Saturday, so they ended it on Friday, which was smart on their part. But you also lead into that on the Friday before with a 16-mile sand run from Coronado to Tijuana, Mexico. So really what it is, the first 5 weeks are literally physical training from sunup to sundown. I remember I was a competitive swimmer in high school, so the swimming wasn't overly difficult for me, but I went with the PTs, the O courses, and the runs and everything like that, and you have to run. During SEAL training, you are not allowed to walk. If you're moving, you have to be running. So you run the run, and then you run back when you're done with the run. Anytime you're moving in SEAL training, you have to be running. You are not allowed to walk, ever. And that's where the stamina comes in the training. And, the first 5 weeks, I remember I weighed 190 pounds when I went into BUDS training. I was a swimmer. When I graduated, I weighed 212, 22 pounds of muscle on me.
Wow. And you always hear the stories about it. At first you're worried about getting in shape, and then as the further you get along, when you get into your assignments, you're out in the field, you somehow find a way to put fear to the side to focus on your job. How difficult is that? Or is it natural?
Well, because you're so well trained. When I spent literally over 1 year in the Navy being trained, I went to boot camp. I went to storekeeper A school because you had to have an A school then. Then I completed BUDS, which at that time was 22 weeks long. Army Airborne's 3 weeks. BUDS is 22, 26 today. It's even 4 weeks longer today. Then I went to Army Jump School for 3 weeks. Then I went to what they call SEER School, Survival, Escape, Resistance, Evasion, where I was waterboarded. And I can tell you it is torture. I made the famous quote, if you give me Dick Cheney 1 hour and a waterboard, I'll have him confess to the Sharon Tate murders. And which I could. Waterboarding is torture. Trust me, guys, it's torture.
Yep.
And I finished SEER school, and then I went to what they call SEAL Cadre, or SBI, SEAL Basic Indoctrination, which was 7 weeks in Niland, California, where you shoot every weapon known to man. You know how to take it apart, put it back together, and you run ops every night for 7 weeks. And I remember I graduated on Wednesday. They said, take off till Monday morning, be at Naval Air Station, North Island. You deploy to Saigon. Off we went to Southeast Asia. I did 2 tours, a 9-month and an 8-month. And the second tour of the Vietnam War had ended. So I did not go to have any contact with Vietnam on my second tour. Because I was late. By the time I was done with all the training, it was February of 71 when I deployed.
From a coaching and football perspective, the thing that's interesting with the course is that you have been involved in sports at a number of levels, military with the SEALs. These are elite units, elite groups where camaraderie, trust in the people around you are just, they're absolute imperatives. If you were to put yourself, let's just say, as a head coach of an NFL football team, how would you build that? Or what's the best way to build that kind of camaraderie amongst a group of men who may not have a whole lot in common. And then the second thing is, how do you put that up against what you're doing now when you're by yourself, you're off the grid, you're alone. Well, it's just like you spent a lifetime with these unbelievable teammates and classmates, and then now all of a sudden you're out by yourself.
Well, I like it. At this point in my life, Pete, I'm 63 years old, and I like being my own boss, and I like doing my own thing. But getting back to what you talked about, if you're a head football coach, here's what I believe. And I'll take note from the great hockey coach, the late Herb Brooks. In order to form camaraderie, you have to have something they can all agree upon. So many times, a good way to do it is to get a group of people like Herb did. He had these hockey players from Minnesota, and he had these hockey players from Boston that all hated each other. And he had to find a way to make them teammates. So what did he do? He got both groups to hate him more.
Yeah.
He was not a fun guy to play for, but you had to respect his understanding of the game and what he was trying to accomplish. But he wasn't your friend.
He was very hard on the younger players. I mean, he worked them really hard, and to me, that's the way it should be.
You wanted to fight with Herb. You didn't go to Herb. You went to Craig Patrick and said, I can't stand this Herb Brooks. I hate him. I hate this coach. And so Craig was the guy who spoke to the players, and Herb was the guy that the players learned to hate and to also make fun of.
And he thought that by doing that, he would create, and he was correct. They ended it because he made himself the focus of that hatred, so that made the team become a family. If you saw the great movie Miracle, where Kurt Russell plays Herb Brooks, he should have won the Academy Award for it, because I knew Herb, and he had Herb Brooks down. I shut my eyes and I hear Herb Brooks. And so there's things like that you can do to build camaraderie. You have to have adversity as a group, I believe, in which to form camaraderie. And if you take it to a football field, adversity is that first couple weeks of training camp, ain't it, Pete?
Yeah. Yeah, no question about it. It's interesting how you do that, because you say that, because I played for a guy at Notre Dame called, Lou Holtz. And Lou's claim to fame is just his ability to turn teams around. He went to a bowl game, a major bowl game, the second year of every stint of every college that he went to. And when you said that about Herb Brooks, he popped into my head, because it was a mutual misery that was shared by everyone. And then you go in the locker room and you joke about it, and guys would take pride in the fact that they were getting beat up and yelled at more than anybody else. It's really amazing how the whole thing gets kind of turned on its head.
Oh, yeah. One thing you learn in Bud's training is never bring attention to yourself. Yeah. I'll tell you a quick story. I got there on Friday and class started Monday. I had no pre-training. I hit the old course on Tuesday and my hands were soft. I got 5 flapping blisters on each hand, those big flappers that break. At the end of the day, I thought, how am I going to make it through this? I'm injured. And Terry Mother Moy, our first phase instructor, comes out with a table and a first aid kit. And he says, okay, who's got flappers? And like a dumb idiot, I raised my hand. I do Instructor Moy. He says, come on out of here, boy. So I run out there, and he asked me, are you right-handed or left-handed? I said, I'm right-handed. He said, okay, hold out your right hand. I held out my right hand. He grabbed every flapper and ripped it off, right?
Oh.
So I'm sitting there with tears running down my face, never had pain like that. You know why? He asked me if I was right or left-handed. He then said, okay, now turn to your classmates, and you do the other hand. So I had to rip the other 5 off in front of and then when I was done, he says, now get back in line, you big dummy. And what did I learn from that? Don't bring any attention to oneself. You're here to survive. This ain't like football where you got to impress somebody to make a cut. Here, right. You're here to survive. If you're standing at the end of 22 weeks, you made it.
Jesse, that's funny because you talk about survival and a bit of beating all the odds. And I know you kind of beat the odds to become governor of Minnesota when you ran as an independent. And I'm curious, I know recently in Minnesota, they basically voted the independent party down from a major party status. What was your reaction to that?
It's sad, but I don't support the third party movement anymore, and I'll tell you why. I support abolishing all political parties. Turn them into political action committees, because any third party in which to compete, the system is so corrupt. It's bribery. It's so corrupt. Any third party will have to corrupt itself in which to compete. You've already got a two-headed monster. Why do you need a three-headed one?
Well, I'm curious, a lot of times we hear your name mentioned as a potential presidential candidate. Now, I know you've actually gone on record to say if you could get on the ballot for all 50 states, you believe you'd be elected the next president of the United States. And so what I wondered was kind of the frustration involved in politics. Do you really want that job? And what do you think you do to be able to win outside of a traditional two-party system?
Well, what I did in Minnesota, the last election, 64% of the people failed to vote, didn't they? That means I got 64%, the majority of potential customers out there. The Democrats and Republicans couldn't even get them out to vote. 64%. Now steal some of theirs. The other thing is, I'll tell you what I'd run on. I would run and give the American people the opportunity to elect the first president who does not belong to a political party since George Washington. We've got only one. And I think if you challenge the American people, I think you could win on that issue alone today. Electing a president that's not part of the two gangs.
And would you want to do the job? If you got on all 50 ballots, would you run?
Well, if I ran, I'd want the job. I don't run to lose. I'll tell you what works in my heart all the time. And this is what troubles me. Would I want it? No, I'd rather be down here in the Baja. I love my life down here. I got freedom. Nobody bothers me. I surf when I want to. It's 85 and sunny. Why would I want to do it? Well, because there's always that little voice in the back of my mind that reminds me of one thing, and it says this: if not me, then who?
Let's assume that call to action came and the public really wanted you. And I know you've got a podcast on iTunes, Podcast One, called We the People with Jesse Ventura. And one of the questions you ask, almost all your guests, the first thing that they would do as a president. So I want to turn the tables on you and ask you the same thing. If you were in fact elected as president, what would you do first?
I would immediately, let's see, first of all, I'd run on this. I would get us completely out of the Middle East. I'd shut down our embassies, and I'd bring all of our troops home, and we would not be at war over there anymore.
Okay, so Pete, what that means is he's not going to turn over the files to the Roswell case or Area 51 first. It's lower on the priority.
Yeah, that's true.
And we won't. That might. Well, wait though. Now that you remind me, the first thing I might do is get taken to Area 51, where I could walk around and find out what the hell really goes on there. And imagine if they wouldn't let me. When you elect a president, they don't let you.
The last time you and I bumped into each other was down on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and that's when you were doing your conspiracy TV. And that's what was my next question was going to be: is of all the conspiracies that you covered, which one is your favorite? I mean, is there one that you're particularly obsessed with?
My favorite is always JFK, John F. Kennedy. They let me go back the second season, and I got to interview people on that where I talked to a lot of very interesting people. JFK, because to me that's where it all starts. It comes down to this, and I don't buy for 1 minute Lee Harvey Oswald shot the president by himself. It's ridiculous. Like my friend Richard Belzer said, 90% of Americans believe there was a conspiracy to kill JFK. The other 10% work for the media and the government. And that's the way it is. No, to me, it begins with JFK because of this. If you can murder the president and get away with it, what can't you do?
I have to tell you, when I look at it, Jesse, you're working a bolt-action rifle pretty fast and pretty accurately if it's one guy there.
Well, I did the best I could. I actually did on the show. We have the same amateur Carcano weapon with the same bullets and everything, and we measured it off perfectly. I'm still an expert marksman, better than Oswald. We didn't even have moving targets. And I shot 15 rounds and hit 3 times.
Wow.
Because the thing is horrid. The sight was as thin as a pencil. It needed shins in it to make it accurate, the one they found that day. It's laughable. And the fastest I could do the bolt, 7.8 seconds. And they're saying Oswald did it in 6. Full. And I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Carlos Hathcock, the greatest sniper in Marine Corps history, he tried to do it and couldn't do it. Oswald was a radar man. He didn't even carry a weapon when he was in the Marines. Obviously, because he wasn't a knuckle dragger. He was a thinker.
And I've actually fired the exact same weapon, and I thought the same thing.
Jesse, before we let you go, tell our listeners what they can expect in Season 2 of Off the Grid. You've talked about a lot of things that you touched on in Season 1, some of the things you started to talk to in Season 2. What can they look forward to?
Well, they look for me uncensored. You know, the great thing about Off the Grid is I don't fall under the FCC, so I can call BS what the long term is. I can say the word, and you don't get fined and suspended and all that stuff. And I'm in control of my own show, and what they're going to do is get current events where I give my perspective of it. My perspective isn't always mainstream. Off the Grid has a dual meaning to it. Number one, it means, yes, I am off the grid. I don't live with electricity from government. I live and provide my own. So I live off the grid. But off the grid also means you're going to hear a perspective that's not mainstream. Mainstream is on the grid. On my show, you're going to hear subjects talked about that mainstream media will not touch, things that the American people aren't made aware of. Like, I'll give you an example. Vladimir Putin of the Soviet Union did about a 2 to 3 hour speech where my son heard it at Russian television, and he called me and he said, Dad, how come the American people are being censored from hearing Vladimir Putin talk? And I asked the same question. Why in the United States were we not allowed to hear our major adversary speak? Why was he censored from us? Well, that's the type of stuff we'll talk about on Off the Grid. The stuff you won't get from mainstream media.
Well, Governor, it's been a real treat to have you on Vikings Mail Call. And before we go, we want to remind our fans to follow Jesse Ventura on Facebook and Twitter at GovJVentura. And we highly recommend that you tune in to Aura.tv for new episodes of Off the Grid on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And I have to tell you, I've watched the entire first season, and Jesse really helps you think about issues in a different way. And he won't pull any punches either with the viewer. He simply tells it like it is. Oh, and you can listen to new podcast episodes of We the People with Jesse Ventura, which airs every Thursday on iTunes and Podcast One. And Jesse, again,
I need to get one thing in. Is Versich still there?
He is.
Oh, yeah, I'm clear.
Pete, I haven't got it clear. What's the deal with Adrian Peterson? Are we getting rid of him or are we keeping him?
Well, I think right now there's a lot of back and forth. It's just the bottom line is what the Vikings are going to be willing to pay to keep him around. And if Adrian thinks that it's an insult, then I think he'll go on his way. I don't think any other team is going to pick up his contract.
Isn't he under contract? No, I mean, they know what they got to pay him, don't they?
Yeah, no, he is under contract. So the Vikings don't want to pay him, then they'll have to cut him. I'm sure they prefer to renegotiate, but we'll see what the Vikings think he's worth.
Pete, I'll tell you my position right now. I say we keep him one more year. He's still the premier running back. Let's see what happens in a year.
I agree, Jesse. I really do, and I do think he'll be back, and I hope so. It's just right now with all the stuff in the media, negotiations. You know how it goes. It's ugly.
Let me finish and put it this way. My mom was a World War II veteran, so she's a hero, right? She'd have gone to jail because he used to hit me with a razor strap, and it used to leave welts. Remember those razor straps that they sharpen a razor? They're about 2 inches. It always hung in the kitchen pantry, so that when I'd walk in the house, I'd see it every day and know that if I screwed up, that's what I faced. And my mom used to do that to me. I'm not condoning it. We're a different culture. We shouldn't do it. But you're also a product of the way you were brought up. And I think Adrian got caught a little bit in that.
I don't disagree. And there's a lot more to this. It's a big story. I mean, we could spend an hour just off the grid talking about Adrian,
Yeah, okay. Well, you guys take care. Good luck to the Vikings. And like I said, I hope they sign Adrian for at least one more year.
I agree, Jesse. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Alan Boomer, he is running the state of Minnesota in a most unusual way. Number 98 for the Minnesota Vikings, Governor Jesse Ventura.
And you might see right there on the back is the name.
That's right. He was presented this by the Vikings. Governor, you grew up in Minnesota.
Yes.
What can you tell us about this rivalry?
Well, it's a great rivalry. Going back to the old days of Vince Lombardi, Carl Eller, Bud Grant. It's gone on for years and years, and it'll go into the new millennium. It's always the natural rivalry, Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Of course, you're a former Navy SEAL, a mayor, a talk show host, a wrestler. What could wrestling wrestling teach the NFL?
Well, wrestling can teach the NFL a little better showmanship, you know. Wrestling doesn't always, when they do a little move, make such a big show out of it. You know, out here they make a first down, like Bud Grant says, make it look like you do it all the time.
I think we could get Alan Boomer to wear a boa.
I think Boomer ought to get a haircut like me. You know, I'm a alpha man.
We know.
You know, and alpha men walk around like this.
We might be needed on the field. Thanks a lot. Back to you guys.
Alpha man with a big old cranium. That's what that is.